Imagine you're in the Southwest desert enjoying the red sandstone rock formations all around you. Suddenly what appears to be a small plane starts flying towards you. Upon taking a closer look, you realize that it's not a plane flying towards you, but a bird. Wishing just over your head is the California Condor, one of the greatest comeback stories in world history. Let's dive in. So what makes this bird so special? As always, let's talk about how to identify the bird to begin with. California condors can be identified by their long, broad wings, which is nearly a 10-foot wingspan. They have a broad, round tail and an overall black body. They also have a naked head that's pink if they're fully adults or a little bit orangish tinted, or dark gray if they're a younger, more juvenile bird. They have a small white hooked bill and white triangles that are large all the way across their wings. Many birds will also have tags with numbers on each wing, but we'll talk about why that is a little bit down the line. In reality, these birds are so large that there's not really many things that you can mistake the California condor for, but some people do mistake turkey vultures for the California condor, especially if they're out looking for the condor. Maybe they're not totally used to seeing birds, and so when they see this big vulture soaring in the air where California condors are found, a lot of times those are just turkey vultures and not the condors themselves. Another bird that can be confused for them are juvenile bald eagles because they have white patches under their wings, or golden eagles. A trick that you can use if you're super far away from the bird is to see how quickly the bird is turning or flapping. If the bird's flapping a lot or turning pretty rapidly, that's a golden eagle or a bald eagle. If it's slowly turning through the air or it's just soaring and you don't see it flapping at all, really, that's most likely a California condor. Historically, Lewis and Clark actually documented the condor's range in 1804 all the way along the Columbia River and throughout the western United States. Today, however, they're super limited to Southern California in Ventura, Santa Barbara, San Luis Obispo, San Benito, and Monterey counties. They can be found in northern Arizona, at and around Page in the Grand Canyon, as well as southern Utah, especially in Zion National Park. Most recently, they were also released in Baja California in the Sierra de Pedro Martir mountain range. The California condor is a sacred keystone species to many indigenous groups and has been so for thousands of years. For the Yurok, Chumash, and Miwok tribes, the condor represents death, rebirth, and spiritual balance. The Yurok and Pima tribes believe that the condors connect the earthly realm to the heavens, and they've been associated with things like thunder and lightning. In ornithology, the California condor has been known as the California vulture in the past, as well as the royal vulture, before eventually landing on its name that we know it now as the California condor. Its scientific name is Gymnogyps californius. Gymnogyps, which is a really difficult word to say, I don't know why I'm struggling with it, comes from the Greek word gymnos, which means bare or naked, and gupos, which is vulture, so naked vulture or naked-headed vulture. Californianus is for the location in which it's found, or at least primarily found in the US. California condors fall into the family Carthididae, and this includes all the New World vultures, including the Andean condor, another very large bird that's pretty much the same size as the California condor, and of course, turkey vultures. Its genus Gymnogyps contains 5 species, of which the California condor is the only remaining extant species. All of the rest of them went extinct thousands of years ago. Perhaps what it's known for the most is the fact that it's critically endangered and almost went extinct. I won't give away the story here, but currently there are several hundred California condors in North America at the end of 2025. But before we get ahead of ourselves, let's talk a bit more about what makes this species so special. Historically, especially thousands of years ago, California condors enjoyed a pretty wide range of habitats and climates. They foraged in open grasslands, forests, and coastlines, all the way down to sea level to much higher elevations. However, due to most of these birds being bred in captivity, the more recent ones at least, and released into the wild, again, no spoilers yet, the California condor has been much more limited and hasn't really needed to venture out to find food. In fact, to support these small populations, we have supplied these birds with feed drops just to get them back on their feet. There is evidence to suggest, though, that as this newer population of captive bred California condors grows, they're starting to venture out more and more into different areas. In reality, the California condor today favors open habitats that allow them to find those carcasses. Also, they really like those areas where rising heat or thermals help them soar up into the air. These birds really rely on the thermals to carry them for hours during the day to find food, and so this is a must for these birds in these types of habitats. Condors actually won't even flap that much. Their body mass is so big that they only really flap when they're taking off or landing, and they're so large that sustained flight is really on those thermals, keeping them up and rising them into the air during the mid-morning hours of the day. Despite their menacing size and really large wingspans, they're pretty chill birds to one another. They like to hang out in groups, and they're pretty social as well. During the hottest hours of the day, and of course during the night, they'll roost on horizontal tree branches, cliff ledges, and they'll typically do so in a small group, kind of like other vulture species like turkey vultures, for example. They'll often have their wings extended out, and they'll do this to dry them during the day or also maybe cool down during really hot temperatures. Condors will typically take flight in the mid-morning hours, like I mentioned, and that's to typically catch those thermals that carry them off into the air. Then during the peak of the day, they'll return to their roosts. They can fly up to 7 to 8 hours straight, and really what they're doing is soaring this whole time, which is pretty incredible to say the least. Being a vulture, California condors almost only consume carrion, but they have dabbled in eating small reptiles and birds on very, very rare occasions. They actually rely on those thermals, again, to carry them across vast swaths of landscape. And they're not actually looking for carcasses. They're not really programmed to look for carcasses. They're looking for other scavenger species. So wherever those scavengers are gathered, the condor will swoop in, land there, and because they're so big, these other birds will kind of clear out for them so they are able to eat. The only bird that they're a little bit wary of, and they'll actually wait sometimes for them to finish, are golden eagles. Golden eagles are a very big bird. They don't have the wingspan that the California condor has, but they do have those really sharp talons, so condors don't always go up against golden eagles. Condors also typically have very strong pair bonds, meaning that they typically stay together for multiple years. The only thing that really drives these birds apart is an early death, which unfortunately happens quite frequently, and we'll talk about this. Their courtship displays, including flying next to each other in kind of these synchronized flights, and they'll preen each other's feathers as well. Like I mentioned before, because they're so large, they don't really have any predators, at least the adults don't. But again, they aren't huge fans of golden eagles, and there is some evidence to suggest that golden eagles have taken out and killed California condors. Their eggs are eaten by golden eagles, black bears, and things like common ravens. Anything that can really get to an egg is going to eat that. And then also during release from captive birds or maybe a sick bird, there is some documented evidence that mountain lions or coyotes will take advantage of these birds if they're given the chance. California condors don't really make any noises, but if you get close enough to them, which I don't suggest doing, they can hiss and they can snort. So why is this bird one of the greatest comeback stories in the entire world? Well, let's dive into that story right now. The California condor story starts all the way back in the Pliocene era, about 12,000 years ago. Near the end of the Pliocene, megafauna across the continent started to die off, and this inevitably began the initial reduction of California condor populations due to a loss of a massive food source. Fast forward several thousand years, and European colonists arrived on the continent. The invention and introduction of lead bullets in the Americas was the final straw to the massive decline in California condor populations across North America. When a lead bullet enters an animal or hits an animal, be it a coyote or a deer, for example, that bullet will fragment inside the body. Lead is not a very hard metal, so it breaks apart really easily. All those tiny lead pieces are poisonous, not only for scavengers that are consuming a carcass, but also for humans as well. In fact, all it takes to kill a California condor is a small fingernail clipping sized piece of lead that it consumes. Another major factor in the decline of the California condor was the agricultural chemical that they sprayed to get rid of bugs called DDT. DDT moves up the food chain, so creatures surrounding those agricultural fields are consuming DDT, and then they keep on passing it along the food chain until eventually it gets into the California Condor's system. And this was the perfect storm of terrible happenings that eventually destroyed the condor population. The birds began to decline rapidly until the total number of birds surveyed in 1987 reached an abysmal 27 total birds in the world. But instead of ignoring the problem, which humans often do, scientists and US officials launched into one of the most expensive conservation projects in US history. They decided to round up the remaining condors in the wild and try to save the species from extinction. There were opponents to this that argued that the birds deserved to live their lives free in the wild, but the reality is if the birds were out in the wild, they wouldn't have made it, and we wouldn't have the California Condor today. So in 1979, they formed the California Condor Recovery Program, and just 8 years later, in April 1987, the final wild condor was captured. And by that time, there was only 22 condors remaining in captivity and in the entire world total. One of the main players in saving the California Condor was Jan Hamber, who was an ornithologist who dedicated her entire life to the bird's conservation. She had decades of field notes, and this allowed her to build the Condor Archives, which entirely focused on condor biology and conservation. This was absolutely key to saving the species. The captive breeding program was led out by the San Diego Wild Animal Park and Los Angeles Zoo, and to save the species, biologists began to raise condor young. They would actually use hand puppets to feed the young to make sure that the young didn't implant themselves or imprint themselves on humans, but rather a mimic of a California condor. This also freed up the parents to lay more eggs and increase the population. This is really interesting, and I didn't know this, but to pilot the reintroduction to the California condor to California, conservationists tested this on Andean condors before in 1988. So what they did is they gathered a whole bunch of female Andean condors and released them into the region. Once it was clear that the Andean condors were doing great and this was possible, they recaptured all of those and sent them back to South America. Then in 1991 and 1992, California condors were officially reintroduced for the first time in 10 years to the wild in Big Sur and Pinnacles National Park, both in California, as well as the Bitter Creek National Wildlife Refuge. Just 4 years later, in 1996, which was the year I was born, yay, go 1996, they were released in the Vermilion Cliffs area in northern Arizona next to the Grand Canyon. These populations then eventually extended into Zion National Park, or they moved between those two areas, but some California condors actually stay year-round in Zion National Park now as well. Now what's really cool is I've actually seen the birds in Zion National Park, and I've also seen them in the Vermilion Cliffs area. So let me just show you one of those experiences, my most recent experience in finding the California condor in the wild. Yeah, those are the ravens. All right, so a little bit of a development from like probably a mile away, spotted a massive bird soaring over where we just came from, Kolob Reservoir. So I got some video of it and I took some pictures. I can't definitively tell what it is. It looks huge. It honestly, to me, looks like a condor, but I also recognize that sometimes you see what you want to see. There it is. All right, I'm just sitting here on this cliffside right now, and we have a California condor just perched on the edge of the cliff over here. Absolutely incredible creatures, largest wingspan in North America, 10-foot wingspan. This is a young one. It has a dark head. When they become adults, their heads turn that pink color that you're used to seeing. So the darker head ones are juveniles, younger, and this is number 67. I'll give you some more information in the voiceover on the background of this bird. We actually saw two condors. The other one flew off over the ridge. We haven't seen it since, but this one stopped right over for us and it's just hanging out with us. So we got the condor. Absolutely incredible. Honestly, it never gets old seeing these birds in the wild. They're absolutely incredible, and they're way bigger than you could ever imagine just watching them on a screen or seeing photos of them. But you might be asking, what happened to lead bullets and DDT? Wouldn't introducing the California condors back into the environment just decimate their populations all over again? Well, DDT was banned in 1972 by the EPA in the United States, and this was due to Rachel Carson's book, Silent Spring, which was published in 1962. This book highlighted the negative effects of DDT on birds, other creatures, and the entire food chain that we all play an integral part in. DDT's also been linked to human health issues, including premature birth. So this didn't just help the condors, it really played a major role in the comeback of the bald eagle, brown pelicans, and countless other bird species which were declining rapidly. Not to mention the fact that it was negatively impacting humans, and we really haven't done enough research on the long-term impacts of DDT on human populations. Unfortunately, lead bullets are not illegal in the United States, and California really is the only state that bans lead ammunition for all hunting. Luckily, awareness has increased in hunting populations, and lead ammunition is not as popular as it once was. That's not the only obstacle that condors have faced since then. From 1992 to 2013, 237 condors died, and the leading cause of this death amongst young condors was the ingestion of trash which was fed to them by their parents. So condors aren't the best about discerning what is edible trash and what is non-edible trash, and that's been a major issue in trying to keep those populations up. Juveniles and adults' main cause of death continues to be lead poisoning, despite the new restrictions and a little bit of a cultural shift. So there's still so much work to do. Other threats include avian influenza, which killed 21 condors in 2023. That might not seem like a lot, 21 condors, but when you have only about 500, 600 condors in the world, that's a good chunk of the population. And really, we've been kind of lucky that it hasn't just absolutely decimated an entire population of condors. Luckily, a vaccine was created in 2024 for the condors, and at this point, 94 birds, maybe more, because some of this information is a little bit dated by 1 or 2 years, have received at least 2 doses of this vaccine. Despite all the risks to the condor population, the first nestling fledged in the wild in 2003. This was the first time since 1981 that a condor was born in the wild. Just under a decade later, in 2010, the wild condor population officially reached 100 individuals in California and 73 individuals in Arizona. And then just 15 years later, the population has risen to over 600 birds worldwide, of course being limited to North America, making this by far the most successful recovery of any bird species on the entire planet. So if you're a birder, bird watcher, or you just love nature or birds in general, you might be wondering, how do I see a California condor for myself? There's a few ways you can see the condor in the wild, and really we're just going to go into the most obvious one. And this is just to go where they've been released. Where are they established now? So Pinnacles National Park in California, Zion National Park in Utah, the Grand Canyon in Arizona, or the Vermilion Cliffs area all give you a decent chance at seeing these fantastic birds. Remember though, in reality, you're not guaranteed to see the California condor. I've been to the Grand Canyon at least 3 times recently and haven't seen the California condor once. I went to Zion National Park and didn't see it in the park. I saw it outside of the park. So make sure you still do your due diligence. Make sure you still do your research to try to find the best spot to see the California condors. And I really hope you run into one. They're absolutely incredible. So let me know in the comments below, what personal anecdotes or stories do you have surrounding the California condor? I really want to hear them. Let me know. As always, check out Bright-Eyed Birding, where I take you on weekly adventures to find these birds in the wild. I'll link my 2 California condor experiences in the description below. One of them is right when that channel started, so everything's not perfect. I was still learning how to do things. Still an amazing experience. And then the most recent one just happened this last year. Both of them were a lot of fun though. If you'd like to support this channel or my adventures, check out my merch or my membership program. Both will be linked in the description below. As always, I really appreciate your support. Thank you so much for joining me. I hope to see you all next time on Bright-Eyed Birding.